The court requests reassignment due to prior personal conflict. The defense attorney's voice echoed through the packed courtroom, but Judge Raissa barely heard him. Her fingers stopped moving over the case file. Morneau, Ethan Morneau. Slowly, she lifted her eyes toward the defense table. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Her older brother sat beside their father in a tailored grey suit, one hand resting confidently on a stack of documents. For half a second, Ethan still wore the same arrogant expression he always used when he thought he was untouchable. Then their father looked up. The colour drained from his face so fast it looked painful. His hand gripped the edge of the table. He actually staggered trying to stand. Raissa felt her pulse hammering inside her ears. 6 years disappeared in an instant. Red and blue police lights flashing across her parents' driveway. Her mother crying without ever looking at her. Cold handcuffs tightening around her wrists. And Ethan standing in the hallway behind them all, saying quietly, "I told you she'd do something desperate eventually." "Your Honor," the clerk asked carefully. Raissa blinked back into the courtroom. Every seat in the gallery was full. Reporters lined the back wall. Federal prosecutors sat across from Ethan's legal team, waiting for her response. Ethan finally recovered enough to speak. "This is clearly a conflict," he said, forcing a nervous laugh. "I mean, this can't seriously continue." But Raissa didn't answer immediately. Because sitting open in front of her was a fraud investigation, almost identical to the one that destroyed her life. 6 years earlier, she had been 23 years old, days away from starting her first position at a prestigious law firm after graduating near the top of her class. That same night, police arrested her for financial fraud. Her parents watched it happen. Neither of them called afterward. Not once. Her job offer vanished before sunrise. Her apartment lease was terminated within weeks. Former classmates stopped answering messages. Even the state bar delayed reviewing her application because of the charges attached to her name. And through all of it, Ethan stayed close to their parents while she disappeared alone. "Your Honor," the defense attorney pressed again, "we formally request reassignment." Raissa finally looked down at the evidence packet prosecutors had submitted that morning. Transfer structures, shell accounts, fake reimbursement coding. Her breathing slowed. Because the pattern was familiar. Too familiar. She turned one page deeper into the file and froze completely. The transaction method Ethan was accused of using now was the exact same one used in the case that got her arrested 6 years ago. And suddenly, one question hit harder than everything else combined. Why was Ethan still using the same fraud scheme that destroyed her life? 6 years earlier, Raissa pulled into her parents' driveway expecting another exhausting lecture about family priorities. Instead, she walked into a room that felt staged. Her mother sat rigidly on the couch, twisting tissues in her hands. Her father paced beside the dining table with flushed cheeks and clenched fists. And Ethan stood near the kitchen island, perfectly calm, as if he had rehearsed the entire evening. The moment Raissa stepped inside, Ethan slid a folder across the table. "We need you to explain this." Raissa frowned and opened it. Bank records. Wire transfers. Client reimbursement forms. Her name appeared across nearly every page. "What is this?" she asked. Ethan crossed his arms. 3 clients reported missing funds from managed accounts. Internal review traced the transfers back to credentials connected to you. "That's impossible." Their father slammed his palm onto the table hard enough to rattle the glasses nearby. "Don't lie to us." Raissa grabbed the papers again, scanning faster now. The timestamps immediately stood out. "These transfers happened during my bar exam week," she said. "I was inside testing centers for 12 hours a day." Ethan answered smoothly, "You still had access to remote systems." "No, listen to me." She pointed at another page. "These routing numbers belong to your company accounts." For the first time, Ethan's jaw tightened slightly. But only slightly. "You think throwing accusations back at me changes what's here?" Every time Raissa tried explaining another inconsistency, Ethan interrupted before she could finish. He spoke calmly, confidently, like someone giving a presentation he'd already memorized. And the worst part was watching their parents believe every word. Her father stared at her like she was a stranger. "You humiliated this family," he snapped, "after everything we sacrificed for you." That sentence hit harder than the accusations. Because Raissa suddenly realized this conversation had started long before she arrived. They had already decided she was guilty. A few minutes later, she found her mother alone in the kitchen. "Mom, please," Raissa whispered desperately. "Just actually look at the records. Ethan's accounts are tied to the transfers." Her mother wouldn't meet her eyes. "Your brother wouldn't lie about something this serious." The doorbell rang. Everyone in the house went silent. 2 police officers entered seconds later holding paperwork. Raissa Morno. Her stomach dropped. One officer unfolded the warrant, while another stepped forward with cuffs already in hand. "We have probable cause to arrest you for financial fraud and embezzlement." "What?" Raissa looked wildly between her parents. "You called the police before even talking to me." Neither answered. Her father looked away. Her mother started crying again. As the officer pulled her hands behind her back, Raissa turned toward Ethan. That was when she noticed something disturbing. He still hadn't looked directly at her once. The cuffs clicked shut. And finally, in a voice barely above a whisper, Ethan said, "I'm sorry, but this had to be you." The holding cell smelled like bleach and stale air. Raissa sat motionless on the metal bench while another woman argued with an officer down the hallway. Her wrists were still red from the cuffs. Around 3 in the morning, an officer walked past carrying paperwork and glanced at her. "You're already all over the news." Her stomach tightened. By sunrise, Ethan's company had released a public statement announcing its full cooperation with investigators. The statement specifically named Raissa as the suspected source of the fraud. Her phone became useless within hours. Former classmates stopped responding. A professor who once promised to recommend her for clerkships suddenly sent a single cold email. "Given current circumstances, I think it's best we create distance professionally." Then came the law firm. Her official offer was revoked before prosecutors even filed formal charges. Outside the courthouse during her first hearing, reporters crowded the entrance shouting questions before deputies pushed her through the doors. "Did you steal client money to pay debts? Did your own family turn you in? Are more charges coming?" Camera flashes exploded across her face, while strangers filmed her from behind barricades. Inside the courtroom, things got worse. Ethan sat in the gallery beside their parents wearing a dark suit and a carefully controlled expression. Their mother looked devastated. Their father looked angry. But neither of them sat near Raissa. Neither even acknowledged her. During the hearing, prosecutors began presenting digital evidence recovered from her laptop. Spreadsheets, transfer records, reimbursement logs. Raissa leaned forward sharply. "My laptop was stolen," she whispered to her public defender. The prosecutor continued speaking. "These files were voluntarily provided to investigators by the defendant's father after discovery at her residence." Raissa's head snapped toward the gallery. Her father avoided her stare immediately. After the hearing ended, she caught him alone near the courthouse elevators. "You took my computer." He kept his eyes fixed ahead. "Your brother said the evidence was there. You broke into my apartment." "I did what I had to do." Raissa stepped closer, voice shaking now. "You never even asked if I was innocent." That finally made him look at her. But not with guilt. With exhaustion. If Ethan was wrong, the investigation would prove it. Then the elevator doors opened, and he walked inside without another word. Months later, prosecutors quietly reduced several charges after inconsistencies appeared in the financial timeline. But by then it didn't matter. Her reputation was already destroyed. No firm would hire her. Landlords rejected her applications after background checks. People who used to congratulate her at graduation crossed streets to avoid speaking to her. So Raissa rebuilt her life in silence. Night shifts at a shipping warehouse. Tutoring students during weekends. Studying alone after midnight to salvage her legal career one exam at a time. Year after year. Until eventually, she became the youngest judge appointed in her district. Back in the present courtroom, Raissa opened another page from Ethan's case file. A yellow investigator note had been clipped beside the fraud timeline. Her eyes narrowed as she read it. Prior related suspect may have been intentionally misidentified. Court recessed 20 minutes later, but Raissa remained inside chambers long after the attorneys left. The sealed evidence boxes sat open across her desk. Transfer logs. Audit summaries. Recovered emails. The deeper she looked, the colder she became. The reimbursement coding matched her old case exactly. Not similar. Exact. The same shell corporations. The same timing gaps between withdrawals and client reimbursements. Even the formatting inside the spreadsheets mirrored the evidence prosecutors once used against her. Raissa flipped through another forensic report. A current employee from Ethan's firm had flagged suspicious archived files after discovering inactive accounts still connected to old transactions under Raissa's identity. He never stopped, she realized. Because he was never punished the first time. A knock interrupted her thoughts. Her clerk stepped inside carefully. Your brother's attorney is requesting a private conference. Raissa stared at the door for a long moment. Bring them in. Minutes later, Ethan entered chambers with his attorney and 2 court staff members present for procedure. Gone was the polished confidence from earlier. He looked exhausted. Older. Cornered. Ethan sat down slowly across from her. You look different, he muttered. Raissa didn't respond. His attorney spoke first. My client wants to clarify historical context that may affect. I lost 6 years because of him, Raissa said flatly. He can clarify it himself. Silence filled the room. Finally, Ethan exhaled heavily. The investments collapsed faster than I expected, he admitted. I kept moving client money trying to recover losses before the audits hit. And you chose me. You understood financial systems, he said quietly. The records would make sense under your name. Raissa's stare never moved. Ethan rubbed his forehead. And honestly, Mom and Dad trusted me more. The words hung in the room like poison. I didn't think it would go that far, he continued. I thought charges would get dropped faster. Raissa almost laughed at that. Instead, she asked one question. Did Dad know? Ethan hesitated. He thought the evidence was real. For the first time all meeting, Raissa leaned forward. That's not what I asked. Before Ethan could answer, someone knocked sharply on the chamber door. A federal prosecutor entered holding a printed evidence packet. We recovered additional server backups from Morno Capital. He handed the documents directly to Raissa. One email had already been highlighted. Sender Daniel Morno. Her father. Raissa read the sentence once. Then again. I destroyed the originals, make sure this ends with her. The room went completely silent. Ethan's face drained instantly. He looked down at the floor and said nothing. And just like that, the final piece locked into place. Her father hadn't been manipulated. He had helped frame her knowingly. Raissa slowly looked toward the chamber window, overlooking the courthouse hallway below. Her father sat alone on a bench outside, unaware the email had been found. Then suddenly deputies started moving fast through the corridor. One shouted into a radio. Another rushed toward the exit doors. Because Daniel Morno had just stood up. And was trying to leave the building. Sir, stop right there. Deputies intercepted Daniel Morno halfway down the courthouse hallway, just before he reached the main exit doors. People nearby turned instantly. Lawyers stopped talking mid-conversation. Reporters near the elevators lifted cameras. Daniel froze as federal investigators approached him holding printed evidence packets. "You need to come with us." His face had gone completely grey. Inside chambers, Raissa watched through the window without moving. Ethan sat behind her at the conference table, staring at the floor with both hands locked together so tightly his knuckles had turned white. Minutes later, prosecutors laid everything out piece by piece. Deleted files recovered from Daniel's office computer. Metadata proving he accessed Raissa's stolen laptop days before her arrest. Transfer histories showing Ethan had secretly paid off massive business debts tied to Daniel's failing construction company. The full truth finally surfaced. Years earlier, Ethan had lost millions through reckless investments hidden from clients and regulators. When internal auditors started digging into reimbursement irregularities, he panicked. He needed another name attached to the fraud before investigators reached him. So he chose Raissa. Not because she was guilty. Because she was believable. She understood financial systems well enough for the records to look convincing. She had access credentials through internship consulting work, and most importantly, their parents trusted Ethan more than they trusted her. Daniel eventually admitted everything during questioning. Ethan had convinced him that if the fraud became public, the entire family would collapse financially. The house could be seized, his business would fail, Ethan would go to prison. "He said we could fix it later," Daniel whispered from the holding room. "He said the charges would fall apart eventually." But they didn't. Instead, Daniel used the spare apartment key he still had while helping Raissa move. He stole her laptop himself. Then he and Ethan altered files together before handing the evidence directly to investigators. Raissa stood silently outside the holding area, listening to the confession through the partially open door. Her father looked older than she remembered. Smaller somehow. When he finally noticed her standing there, his voice cracked immediately. "I watched every hearing," he admitted weakly. "Every promotion after you rebuilt your career, every article about you becoming a judge." Raissa said nothing. "I wanted to call you 1,000 times. Then why didn't you?" Daniel lowered his eyes. "Because you would have asked me if I knew." That answer hit harder than the confession itself. Raissa removed her glasses slowly, pressing them into one trembling hand before speaking again. "You did know." He started crying then, quietly at first, then completely. But Raissa couldn't bring herself to comfort him. She couldn't even call him Dad anymore. Within weeks, Ethan accepted a plea deal after forensic accountants connected both fraud schemes completely. His financial licenses were revoked permanently. Civil lawsuits swallowed everything he owned. Daniel was charged with obstruction, evidence tampering, and conspiracy related to falsified evidence submission. And for the first time in 6 years, public headlines changed. Former classmates and attorneys who once avoided Raissa began reaching out with apologies and invitations. News stations corrected earlier coverage about her arrest. Most messages went unanswered. Because she no longer needed validation from people who disappeared the moment her life collapsed. The final hearing was quiet. Ethan stood before the bench looking exhausted, stripped of every ounce of confidence he once carried. "I am sorry," he said finally, "for all of it." Raissa looked at him for a long moment. Then she answered calmly, "You didn't just take 6 years from me." The courtroom stayed completely silent. "You gave me a reason to become impossible to bury." Months later, Raissa began volunteering with legal aid groups helping wrongfully accused defendants repair damaged records, careers, and housing histories. And every now and then, while walking through the same courthouse where she was once processed in handcuffs, she remembered the night her family watched her life collapse without stopping it. The last time they saw her in that building, she was being led away in cuffs. The final time, she walked out alone through the judge's entrance,